Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast,
where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture.
We talk to producers all over the country,
From small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations.
Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades,
We hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs.
here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast. Again, I appreciate all of you that have taken the time to download and listen. Appreciate the reviews that we've been getting and some of the ratings. We are on our 10th episode, and you may be wondering, Troy, are you sure about that? Yes, we are on 10th, but for some reason, some dummy has a hard time keeping track of the numbers. You'll see if you go back through our archives, we have 2 number 8s, and so we skipped 9. But this is our 10th episode, and again, appreciate those that are giving good feedback there. Speaking of feedback, I did get some feedback said with an audio concern. Said my voice was much, much lower than the guest, and it was difficult to listen to. First of all, I want to apologize for that. Obviously, as we're going through this, still figuring out our processes and making sure we have everything balanced properly. But as some of you may know, I do these interviews in batches. So I can sit down and in 24 hours maybe do 2 or 3, even 4 interviews. So as episode 10 that you're about to listen to, our interview with Deb, let me know if you would please. Email me at troy@redtoolhouse.com and let me know if the audio balance is good or if it's bad, because this is a next batch of interviews that I did, and I think I have things more tuned in there better. But if you don't mind, please give me some feedback there and let me know. I want to make this as listenable as possible. Don't want anything like that to obviously scare people off. We want to have good quality there. Well, some updates. What's going on here at Red Tool House? Well, we have 2 sows that we're ready to breed. In fact, should have standing heat tomorrow morning. I was just up checking on them before dark, and Mercy, one of our large sows, proven sows, she's real close to standing. She was just not quite there yet. So I think first thing in the morning we'll go out at sun up and check her out there and see if it's going to be successful. One other update that's unrelated to Red Tool House, but something you all may run into if you're on Facebook and belong to any of the Pastured Pig Facebook groups. There's rumor, there's speculation that Facebook is going to be shutting down a lot of the animal-based, farm-based websites or Facebook pages and Facebook groups due to their stance on animals and using animals for livestock and consuming animal flesh, that type of thing. I haven't seen anything official from Facebook, but there is a lot of discussion about things being shut down or being warned, being threatened to be closed down. So if you've been in some of those groups, you may see some discussion that people are moving over to the MeWe social media platform. I've gone over there. I'm in the Pastured Pig for Meat and Profits group over at MeWe. Not nearly as big as it is on Facebook, but it is growing, and it's a way that we it's our understanding that we think it's going to be a little more friendly to us hog raisers. So you may want to check that out and try that platform out. Well, as far as our guest today, on today's episode, we're speaking with Deb Jones-Schuler from Wild Plum Farm. And Deb's one of those people that, hated to stop the conversation. We could have just kept talking. She has some really good insight, some good experience. She admits she's kind of new in the game and learning, but she's really hit the ground running. She has a pretty good setup there and really like some of the elements she's implemented. So she's in Washington State, just south of the Canadian border, on an old dairy farm built in 1927. She has some interesting challenges with water and irrigation for her herd. She'll get into that in the discussion. They're kind of like this high elevation desert style topography with what's called shrub steppe, which we Easterners, I have no clue what that is. But she describes that pretty well. Has the opportunity to process on farm, at least to butcher and to scald and scrape and eviscerate. Some opportunities there, and Washington allow them to do so. Feeding with fodder and some bulk apples. So just really good discussion, and I won't give any more of that away. We'll jump right in and let Deb tell her story. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. So glad you all decided to join us, and I'm really excited about tonight's interview. I'm meeting with Deb Jones-Schuler from the Wild Plum Farm, and she is in mid-state Washington. Is that correct, Deb?
Not quite mid-state. I'm north. I'm just, as the crow flies, I'm about 20 miles from the Canadian border.
Oh, okay. Much further north then. Okay.
Yep.
Well, welcome to the podcast. And if you don't mind, just go ahead and dive in and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thanks. Nice to meet you, Troy. Thanks for having me.
Certainly.
As you said, we are in north central Washington. We are in a beautiful, rural, sparsely populated valley called the Methow Valley. It has a beautiful river running through it and tall mountains surrounding it. We're just over the North Cascades mountain range from the Seattle western edge of Washington. So we get a lot of visitors here from the west side, and so it's a tourist community, but it's also an traditional agriculture community.
Okay, so the question that jumps into my mind, and maybe in others that aren't familiar necessarily with Washington State, so are you in the rainy portion or the non-rainy portion of Washington State?
We are in the non-rainy portion. We're on the dry eastern slope of the North Cascades Mountains. So we are more sort of high mountain desert climate. There's a lot of shrub steppe, high mountains all around us. So we get a little bit of rain. The best part of where we live is that we have 4 seasons, and it's a big ski destination in the winter months. We have a lot of Nordic skiing and a tiny downhill area, but it's mostly the Nordic skiers that flock to our area and enjoy getting out of the rainy west side of the state.
So Nordic skiing, is that what we out here east call cross-country skiing?
Oh, yep, same thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So I assume then, obviously, you get enough precipitation in the winter, at least, to justify having a good snow base for Nordic skiing, and a decent amount of rainfall to keep you from being completely desert, I assume.
Yes, we, yes and no. We're currently in a declared state of drought. We had very low snowpack last year, and we're very reliant on water rights, irrigation systems, and just keep our fingers crossed every year that we do get enough snow in the mountains, and it slowly makes its way down the valley. But we've also been hit very hard with wildfires the last 5 or 6 years that have been pretty devastating to our community.
No.
But yeah, for the most part, it's lovely, and we get just enough moisture to make it habitable.
All right, excellent. Well, obviously, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but that reminds me, that makes me think of an interesting question. So, how much is water for your pigs? How much of it is that a challenge of your daily farming practice?
It's a pretty big challenge, and it's actually also a very critical part of my farming practice to have those water rights. So we are on an irrigation district, and our water comes out of a high mountain lake. And typically we have our water irrigation system is turned on from May 1st until October 1st. This year it will probably be turned off August 1st. And so that will affect my feed costs. It'll affect how I plan for my fall and heading into the winter with my herd of pigs.
Wow. So are you in one of those areas where you're regulated as far as rain catchment and those type of things go?
We're not. No, we are not. We haven't gotten to that point, although many of us have been exploring conservation practices over the last decade, and one of the things I've been investigating and making changes to my farm around are permaculture practices. So trying to be, aware of how I can plant and utilize the natural contours of my land to better capture the moisture that we do have, planting certain crops so that I'm being more efficient with what nature's providing, and having sort of a contingency plan so that if water does get turned off or we have a wildfire, that we're not completely devastated by that.
Excellent. Yeah. So, and again, I know we're kind of getting ahead of we'll have to back up here and do a little bit more of the intro, but I really appreciate this conversation. As far as, so do you have opportunities with wells? Is it one of those situations in your area of the state that a well becomes cost prohibitive?
A well would be cost prohibitive if it were allowed, but
wow.
We currently have a closure of any new wells in our valley. So we have a domestic well, and we can pull, a certain amount out of that every day, but that isn't nearly enough to irrigate the acreage that I have. So we just rely on our irrigation rights and keep our fingers crossed that we can hang on until the fall weathers change and things cool off and the rains come back.
Wow, that fascinates me. Where we are in central West Virginia, of course, where you consider the Mid-Atlantic region, we get more rain than we know what to do with.
Yeah.
In fact, I think we got an inch of rain just here in the last hour. It's been intense, but the things we take for granted that you all covet, and I'm sure there's things that you all take for granted that we covet. But it's interesting.
Yep.
Well, okay. Well, if we could, I'm sure our listeners would love me to back up and actually get some more details about your setup, and you've given us a little intro about yourself. But tell us about your farm. Maybe the size, kind of what you're doing there. Are you just pigs? Do you have some other things going on? Are you going it alone? Just give us some details there, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we've been on our farm for a little over 20 years. It's an original homestead that was built in 1929, which I realize for folks on the East Coast is not very old at all, but for the West Coast, that's a pretty old place. So it was built in 1929 as a dairy farm originally. And the barn, we have the original dairy barn on the farm was built for 90 head of cows. And then it's gone through different iterations over the years. It was an alfalfa farm. It was a beef cattle ranch for a while. And when we bought it, it was sort of on its last legs and it had been neglected for a while. We didn't do much besides have a couple saddle horses for the first decade and a half that we lived here. We all had jobs off farm to pay for the farm. But just in the last 6 years, we've taken to farming. I've taken to farming full time. The rest of our crew is still working off farm. But so we have 40 acres altogether. 20 of those are irrigated pasture, and 20 are a steep hillside of shrub steppe. So lots of sagebrush and bitterroot and some native grasses. And we also run horses on our property. We have a rescue donkey from Texas. We raise laying hens and meat birds. And then we also take in folks, retired chickens, those folks who can't put their hen in the stew pot, bring their chickens to us, and they're a main part of our pastured pig pest control program.
All right, very good.
Yeah. So we at any given time we might have 30 to 50 chickens running around with the pigs, and so that's always fun to see them carrying on.
Great.
So that's our farm. I'm the primary pigger around here. My family pitches in when I holler at them or when they're home from their day jobs. We have two extended family live on our property. My son and his partner are in the original farmhouse, and my husband, my daughter, and I live in a home we built about 20 years ago. So we share the property, and everyone's very invested in keeping it a working farm. My son and daughter are the slaughter team when it comes to processing pigs. We do all of that on farm. My husband runs after food for me a lot for pig feed, and then my daughter-in-law is a soap maker, and she uses the lard from our pigs in her soap business.
Oh, excellent! So it sounds like there's five. It sounds like 5 adults that are pitching in on the farm. Then am I doing the math right there?
Yep.
All right. Wow, that's
Yep.
that's a good work crew.
It is a good work crew. I'm the day-to-day operations person. They're all scattered to the wind most days, but when it comes time to process or fix a tractor or do the heavy lifting, they'll come help me out, which is great.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in all of that. So let's back up a little bit. You talked about X amount of acreage that were was the term scrub step? What was
shrub step?
Okay, shrub. Okay, scrub.
Yep.
That's something
You were
completely
close.
different. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so shrub step. So again, being East Coaster, I'm not familiar with that. Could you explain that to some of us Easterners as to what that is, what that looks like?
Sure. So shrub steppe is basically an arid landscape. It's not quite desert, but it gets enough moisture that that the landscape can support perennial grasses and some drought-tolerant small shrubbery. So, for example, that's sagebrush, a bitterroot plant, which has very small green foliage on it, and these things don't grow taller than maybe 3 or 4 feet. And then there's bunch grass, and that this time of year is beautiful tall green grass, but it's in bunches that are probably 6 to 8 inches in diameter, and they grow in the spring. They're good forage for the deer. Cattle are free ranging on a lot of shrub steppe in our region. And then those grasses can be eaten down quite short, and then they'll come back next year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was going to be my next question. So are you providing access to any of your animals on that at this time?
I don't run my animals on the shrub steppe for 2 reasons. One, it's quite steep, and it's quite fragile, the shrub steppe, and so I have kept my pigs off of it. I could run the horses on it if I needed to, but we have enough feed for them in other acreage on the property. So it's just native foliage at this point, and a nice buffer from neighbors and whatever else might come through.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, another comment you made there, I'd like you to discuss a little bit if you don't mind. You were talking about your retirement home for chickens, and I love that because we get that a lot too. We have a lot of city friends that in our local town are allowed to have 6 chickens. So once they pass the egg laying stage, they always give us a call and say, "Hey, Troy, Kelly, can you guys take our chickens? We don't want to keep them anymore because they're not laying, and the kids will be upset if we butcher them. So can we bring them out to your farm?" And of course, when we say yes, you can bring your chickens out to be retired, that kind of has a different meaning, I think, than what you were describing there. But if you don't mind, describe what you've got going on there.
Well, so I have always had a hard time penning up animals for very long periods of time. So if you ask my family, it's a bit of a problem for me. So when we first started raising the pigs on pasture, I think it was one of my mentors, Walter Jeffries from Sugar Mountain Farm, runs a lot of chickens with his pigs as his pest control. And I thought, well, there's a solution for me. Since I have a hard time keeping chickens cooped up, I am going to just put it out there to the universe that I will take anybody's retired chickens and they will be part of my pest control program. And it didn't take long for word to spread in our little town. And so same as you, people can't bear to do away with them or it'll upset the kids or whatever. So they show up with their birds in dog crates or in the back of the Suburban or whatever they do. And I take them and I just let them run with the pigs, and they, every day they're out there picking through the pig poop and eating the bugs. They find shelter with the pigs in their shade shelters, and the pigs, for the most part, don't even blink an eye at the chickens. If a chicken dies of natural causes, they will eat it, and not leave one remnant. So it's a nice recycling program. And if they happen to lay the occasional egg, that's a treat for the pigs as well. So it's a nice relationship.
That's great, and I have to say I love that you described that for us in such detail, because we've done similar, and it was really by accident. We were doing some free ranging of our chickens as we were trying to figure out exactly how we wanted to manage them. We have a lot of raccoon issues in our area. That's one of our more predominant predators. And of course, they just lay chickens to waste once they get started. So as we were free ranging, we discovered that as the chickens that were smart enough to go hang out with the pigs would not have any issues, because the pigs were the buffer for from the raccoons. Excuse me. And then same situation. Everyone kept saying, "Oh, your pigs are going to kill your chickens," and they were pretty calm and just let them go. In fact, as we would put out feed, the chicken would be right there beside the pig at the pig trough, eating feed. And as long as the chicken didn't get in the way and get accidentally stepped on, then they were fine. If they got accidentally stepped on, then and were in the throes of death, then a pig would turn around and take care of them. But it was really interesting, and I like your point. It's very similar to what we see at Polyface Farms. Joel Salatin's farm is just a couple hours from us, and he does the same thing where he rotates his egg layers in behind his cattle as he moves those, and it's a great setup, because, as you mentioned, they're busting apart the poop, they're extracting fly larvae, any insects there, spreading that manure out, allowing it to disperse throughout the ground a little better. And of course, they get the opportunity to eat and to graze and to do all of that stuff. And like as you said, with eggs, it's just a bonus after that point.
Yeah. Yep. My daughter-in-law also raises chickens, so she's in charge of the laying hens and the meat birds, and she runs the meat birds behind my pigs, just like it sounds like you just described at Joel's place. Mm-hmm. And so they are a little bit more confined, but we do have this large population of retired chickens that are just wherever they want to be.
Yeah, a great accessory to your pig herd. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely has all kinds of benefits. Okay, so wow, there's all kinds of spokes to this wagon wheel of discussion here. So you mentioned Walter Jeffries, which I'm currently communicating with Walter. We're trying to set up a time to get him interviewed.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, I've been following him for a while on Facebook and watching what he does on his website, and I hear more and more people drop his name, which is great. So tell us just a little bit, without giving away too much of Walter's secret sauce, because we'll get that from him, but tell us from your perspective, how important was it to have a mentor like Walter help you out, and what kind of guidance did he give?
I would say I wouldn't have done what I'm doing now if it hadn't been for the discovery of Walter. The only experience I really had with pigs prior to getting my first breeding pair of Tamworths was helping my son raise 4-H pigs years ago. And, that was a very traditional small pen, lots of processed food, get them to wait, by fair time, and off they go. Right. And I knew I didn't want to do that again. I knew when I learned that heritage pigs in particular could forage on pasture, I felt like that was the way I wanted to go. And then a friend of mine happened to stumble across Walter's website, and I just started following him and stalking him, and just like getting as much as I could from him. I correspond a little bit with him via email or Facebook, but mostly he's just been so thorough in his blogging and all of the wonderful information that he's been willing to share on his website that I just absorbed as much as I could and continue to learn from him. To this day, I'm far from an expert. I've still got a very steep hill to climb, but it's just been very educational. It's been very eye-opening to know that you can do things that are actually a more traditional, old-fashioned way of raising pigs. And I as I said, I don't have it figured out by any means, but I have the confidence and the courage because of his sharing of his knowledge to try new things and try to branch out and be a little unconventional, I guess.
Yeah, isn't it great? I think I saw a stat the other day that I believe Walter has over a decade worth of blog content on his website.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
extremely robust amount of information.
Yeah, it's so rich and it's just so valuable, and I really appreciate that. And I've really, as I've learned through trial and error here, I've really tried to take his lead in regards to sharing that information. And so I was just thinking about that today, getting ready for this conversation with you. I do about, oh my gosh, maybe 24 farm tours a year, and I try to just share as much of the information that I can with people exploring raising pigs on pasture, and I'm just really trying to be, generous of spirit the way Walter has been with all of us. So
yeah, he's very, very approachable, and again, I know we don't want to make this podcast all about him, but I have been impressed with that. Even on the Facebook group that he's a part of, Pastured Pig, I believe, he's very, very approachable and answers a lot of questions. Definitely jumps in. He seems to. I don't think he's a moderator, but he's so active on that. Always willing to give people insight and advice. It's really neat to see somebody share their experience in that way.
Yeah, it's great, and he's taught me so much. I'm very grateful for it. So, yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, another thing that you said there, and maybe this ties into some of the influence that Walter's had with you, you talked about processing your pigs on farm. Mm-hmm. So let's back the card up a little bit. So if you're processing on farm, are you producing your hogs for commercial sales, for private sales? What are you doing to generate revenue with your hogs, or are they just for private consumption?
Yeah, great question. So we currently sell our hogs as custom exempt pork shares. So we don't have a USDA processing plant within 5 hours of us. And because of my farming philosophies and not wanting to cart live animals that distance, I've focused more on my custom exempt sales. So in case some of the listeners don't know what that is, I sell quarter, half, and whole shares of pigs, and the customer has to buy the animal, quote unquote, live, and my job is to get it slaughtered and to the butcher, and then they pick it up from the butcher, cut and wrapped in tidy little packages. And so to that end, we have a couple of options locally in terms of that slaughter, the first phase of that process, which is the slaughter. We have one mobile processor in our county, and then we have the option of doing that slaughtering on farm if we've met the qualifications, the WSDA, Washington State Department of Ag qualifications. So we did that. And we did that for a couple of reasons. Mobile slaughters come and go, and they're often booked, far in advance, and it's hard to get them to come when you need them. We've also had a shortage of butchers since we started this, so that's been a challenge as well, but we can talk about that later. So my son did a internship with a local slaughter business and learned how to do that for our pigs, and so he and my daughter do that. They slaughter, and then we do a scald and scrape. We have a scald and scrape machine that we got from a business that was going out of business. So we set all that up here, and so the pigs never leave the farm alive. They're born here and they die here, and then we take that carcass to the local butcher. It's cut and wrapped for the customer.
Okay, so make sure I'm understanding. So you are dispatching on farm. You're scalding and scraping. Are you eviscerating at that time, or are you allowing? Okay, so you take it to the point of evisceration. So you're taking an eviscerated, what would be considered a hanging carcass at that point, to the butcher to go ahead and be broken down based upon your customer specs.
That's right. Yep.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Boy, I like that Washington gives you that opportunity to do that. I'm with you. We don't. Our only USDA processor just gave up his certification, so now we're about a 4-hour to 5-hour drive to any USDA processor, and I just hate the thought of transporting pigs that far. Now, I'm unaware in our state that we have the option that Washington does where I can dispatch on farm, but Wow, I love that. I love the fact that I love having control. That's always been the biggest issue with raising hogs is you go through all the trouble to care for your hogs, to raise them, to do what you want to do with them, to raise them in the manner that you want. And then you have to turn them over to somebody who you're not 100% sure if they appreciate the hog as much as you do when it comes to
That's right.
dispatching and processing and butchering. So
yeah,
wow,
yeah, that's been a really big deal for me, and it's taken a number of years to figure it out for ourselves. But I'm also part of a coalition of producers in our valley, or our county rather, and some nonprofit conservation districts that we've been working for 2 years to get a USDA small plant established in our county. And it's been quite a process. It's been very educational. We've done a lot of surveys, a lot of outreach, and just really trying to advocate for just more access for small producers. And we've been very successful, and that plant is actually opening this fall.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
So that will be 45 minutes from my farm. So I am looking forward to exploring that option, and because I've been a part of it from the ground up, I feel confident that my pigs will be well cared for there. But that will open up a whole nother marketing venue for me, and change my goals for farming and all of that comes with retail sales. But it's been a long process.
Yeah, it's great to have options, and it really allows you to be much more flexible. And I think have a little bit of a comfort zone too when you look at the business side of it. That know that you've got options there when it comes to finishing your product.
Yeah.
Well, okay, this is actually like a podcast in reverse, because we're going deep into some subjects, and then we're backing up to some of the higher level stuff. So let's back up again, and let's talk about your breed of choice. And roughly how many hogs you have that you finish on an annual basis? Just kind of give us a little tour there.
Yeah. So I, after a lot of research and looking at what I had for forage options and what my climate could support, I landed on the Tamworth pig, and I found my first breeding pair came from a farm in the Spokane area, which is about 3 hours from me. So that's the animal I've been raising, and I do farrow to finish. My peak production has been about 80 pigs a year, but as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've had a go around with butchers. We had a butcher retire. We had one kind of get run out of town. We had,
that happens at times.
various things have occurred. So the butchering options have been a little bit of a roller coaster. But so I'm currently just at 30 pigs, but we have a new butcher who's doing a fantastic job, and then we have the potential for the USDA plant. So I'm slowly rebuilding my herd, and I'll probably get up to 80 to 100 by this time next year. So that's fun. And I currently have pigs ranging from 2 months to 9 years. My first pig is 9 years old, and she's our forever pig. We've decided we're just going to let her die a natural death, and she serves as our grandmother and mentor, and she's just a wonderful spirit. So that's why I have a 9-year-old pig.
Excellent. She's earned her keep.
She's earned her keep. Yeah. So mostly I have Tamworths. I have been playing with the pigs' diet for quite a few years, and at one point I felt like the pigs were too lean for most of my customers' taste, and so I brought in a large black and introduced that cross, the large black and tam cross, to try to get a little more natural fat on the carcass. But I've made some other adjustments that we can talk about here in a little bit. So at this point, I'm phasing those large blacks out, and I'll just stick with the Tamworths.
Okay. So out of those, so you said right now you have about 30 on farm, and you've gone as high as 80. Are you taking all those to finish? Are you selling some of those as growers for other people? How does that normally parse out?
I typically take all of those to finish, although the last 2 years I've sold about 10 piglets to a 4-H group over in the Seattle area. Their county fair has a heritage pig class, and so the Tamworths have been doing quite well over there. They've actually been grand champions, which I just learned when they came to pick up their second batch this year. But typically, I am not selling piglets to anyone locally. I'm just raising them to butcher weight myself.
Okay. So your customer base, is it all primary sales? Do you have any wholesale? Are you doing anything with restaurants? Any distribution there?
No, it's all custom exempt because I don't have any USDA.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's going to keep you in that
all
realm.
Private. Yep, it's all private, and for the most part, it's within my own community. But I do have a small, growing customer base from the Seattle area as well.
Yeah, that's great to move. To move as many as 80 pigs with private sales. That's a good customer base. Good.
Yeah.
I assume you have good communication practices with that customer base. It sounds like.
I try.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you don't mind, let's segue over. I was looking at your website, and something jumped out at me was your section on fodder. Would you care to enlighten us on what you've got going on there?
Sure. So the fodder came about out of my desire to be grain-free. It's where I live is very isolated, and so buying a complete hog feed is pretty cost prohibitive, and people do it, but in order to keep the end cost of my pigs at a reasonable rate for my customers, I just felt like I needed to explore some other ways, and I knew Walter was doing it, and I thought if Walter can do it, I'm going to find a way to do it. So for a few years, I focused just on my pasture and supplementing with apples and whatever else I could bring in, and that was less than ideal. I would say the pigs were just far too lean. They would get to weight, but it took about 16 months, and they just weren't the best quality. So I did some research on fodder, and in 2016 I had the opportunity to write a grant proposal to an organization called Human Links Foundation and the Washington Tilth Alliance that supports small farmers and their efforts to be sustainable. And I was fortunate enough to get that grant, which enabled me to purchase a fodder growing system. So that consisted of some metal racking and channels to grow fodder and some lighting and that sort of thing. And so since 2016, I've been tinkering with that system, and I have had some success, and I now grow about 200 pounds of fodder a day. I use barley seed and water, so it's a hydroponic setup, and I aim to feed the pigs about a pound of fodder per 100 pounds of pig weight.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. And so that addition of fodder, plus the free choice apples that they get, and in the winter I feed alfalfa and oat hay, has improved the carcasses by, I would say, 80%. I now get to weight in about 10 months, and they have a beautiful fat cap, and there's nice marbling, and they're just in super great health. And I've managed to keep my feed costs down. So.
Wow. So you've gone, so again, if I'm hearing you correctly, so you went from finishing around 16 months to implementing this fodder system, and now you're finishing around 10 months.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
All
yeah.
right.
And the quality, then they just look fantastic. And again, my goal, my bottom line was to try to keep my costs down so that I could pass that savings on to my customers, and I've been able to do that. So, and it's also, additionally, it's easier for me to source barley seed than it is for me to source a complete hog ration.
Yeah. Well, have you noticed that? Does that show up? Does it manifest in the finished product? Have you heard? Have you tried it? Is it different? Does it have some flavor benefit from it?
I don't necessarily notice a difference in flavor, other than there's there's better marbling, and there's a little bit more fat. So I would say all in all, just the quality at the end when you've finished cooking a piece of meat, it's more moist.
Yeah.
It tastes a little richer because of that moisture.
Excellent.
And the customer feedback has been excellent, so that always helps too.
Yeah, that's always the
Right.
trick. Customer doesn't like it, they'll let you know usually.
That's right. They will certainly let you know. That's right.
Well, I'll take this time to point out that on your website, the Wild Plum Farm, you have a section on fodder, and you have some pretty good detail there that you go through, even some step-by-step points, as well as your pictures. So looking at that setup on the pictures, and for those of you listening, obviously this is the part where podcasts break down as just audio, but if you get a chance to go to her website and check that out, it takes a bit of space there. So are you utilizing your large barn? Do you have a specific area that you've built to house your fodder system?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of people wanting to grow fodder face. It's like, where will you house that? I took over my garage. I had a heated garage that I just kicked everything else out and moved my fodder system in. It does require, in the winter, it requires heat. In the summer, it requires really good ventilation. Because if your humidity level and your temperatures get wonky, you end up growing a lot of mold, and we all know that that's not good for our pigs. So so there's a little bit of tinkering that goes on, and I think I talk a little bit about that on the website. But I can't grow it in the barn because I don't have a space that's insulated and heated with the water drainage, but the garage is working great and my car has survived just fine outside.
Well, I was going to say, do you find that in mid-January you regret this decision at any time?
Sometimes when I'm scraping the 2 feet of snow off my windshield.
Right.
Sorry, it's not in the garage, but no, it's fine because it's really fun to do, and it's made such a difference in my farming practices that I'm just really excited that I have the opportunity to do it. So.
Well, let's talk about scalability with that. So from at 30 hogs right now, when you get back up to 80, how much effort is that into scaling that up? What are we looking at? Is there additional investment, or is it just more trays?
It's more trays, and I think at this point, and I talk about this a little bit on the website, I would not put the money into a commercial setup again. And I've actually modified my commercial setup significantly. So I would be able to create my own racking with, 2x4s and that sort of thing. But I also, there are ways for me to spread that fodder around more specifically. So if I get back up to 80 hogs, I'll focus the fodder on my growers. And I will not worry so much about my breeding stock, who maintain their condition much better on the pasture and the hay that I supply and the apples in their diet. So I wouldn't necessarily need to grow that much more per day if I focused. Right now, everybody gets it because I can do that, but I wouldn't have to necessarily. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry if you've mentioned this and I just missed it, but as far as the apples go, where are you sourcing those? Is that something you're purchasing? Or are you getting overrun from some other location?
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this about Washington State, but it's known as the apple capital of the world.
They do grow some apples out there, yes.
And so because of that, there are lots of apple packing sheds and warehouses that are overflowing with apples that are deemed not fit for human consumption.
Okay.
And so they're just known as waste apples, and anybody who shows up with a trailer can get a trailer full of apples free. So we make a trip once a week to our local packing shed and come home with about 6 tons of apples.
Wow. That's a lot of apples.
Yeah. It is a dream come true. I didn't know about this until about 2 years ago, and somebody clued me in, and it's pretty incredible.
So how does that keep? So when you get 6 ton, obviously I assume that's not fed out all at once. You've stored that. How does that keep?
Well, in the hot summer months, it gets pretty gross actually, and so I do just try to dump it all into the various pastures where the pigs are. I have 3 different groups of pigs, and so I will feed it all out at once. Otherwise, it's actually a little dangerous for me to deal with it because it draws yellow jackets.
That's what I was thinking.
Insects
Yeah.
that I tend to react poorly to. So I try to feed it all out, but this time of year and in the winter, I'll just give everybody a scoop or 2 off the tractor, and I'll spread it out over the week.
Yeah.
But pigs are, I'm sure you know this with your own pigs, but they're so smart about their eating, and if you did that to a herd of horses, they'd gorge and colic and kill themselves.
Exactly.
And pigs are just very, very smart about how much they eat and when they eat and what they eat. So
they are. They know when to walk away from the table. That's interesting.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So have you found? And again, this is my twisted logic, I guess, but in my mind, I think have you run into where any of your apple piles in the dead of summer have fermented? Have you experienced that?
I have, and they start to smell. Yeah, that's like the main odor on our farm is the fermenting apple piles. But and if they get too gross, the pigs just work them into the ground, and
right.
They don't eat those last bits. But yeah.
Oh, but what a great option! Yeah.
With getting them cleaned up.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I love as people raise pigs on pasture in different areas, different regions of the country. You find out what's extra, what's the commodity around. And here, obviously, we don't have as much apples, but I've got out of 100 acres, I have 90 acres of Appalachian hardwood forest. So in the fall, we've got acorns, we've got hickory, we've got walnuts, we've got beech nuts. I mean, we have protein literally falling out of the sky on a regular basis. So my feed costs drop dramatically in the fall. And and then you hear people say, "Well, the apples," and then brewer's grain, and all these type of things. It's just really neat to see regionally how people deal with other people's surpluses.
It is. Well, and I went through 3 years of collecting brewer's grain from our local brew pub, and I thought that was great. But then I brought on the fodder, and I realized fodder was much more bang for my buck, and so I've actually given up the brewer's grain account, and I just focus on growing green grass instead.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, what other insight do you have for us, Deb? There's I've kind of gone through my question list here, but I feel like there's plenty more to talk to you about.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm thinking about. Well, it might be interesting to your listeners to know that most of my pastures are just a simple 2 strands of electric fence.
Oh yeah, okay.
So that is simple fencing, which is always nice. I do have dedicated winter paddocks for my pigs because of our snow load here. The electric fences get buried pretty quickly, so I have created 3 places that I bring my herds into for the winter with that are fully fenced with the hog panel, the 4 or 5 foot tall hog panels, and they have their 3-sided shelters there. And I've learned from Walter again that if I fill those shelters in the fall with fresh wood chips and feed them their hay on there for a while, they get a nice thick bedding that heats up and gets us through some very cold winter weeks. So they winter over really well, and that's always good to see.
So you mentioned your farrowing. So do you find with your seasonal issues, do you farrow only certain times a year, or do you go all year farrowing?
I have landed on just farrowing in the spring and the fall. My first couple of years I winter farrowed, and quickly realized that unless I have a larger demand for pigs, I do not need to be farrowing in the winter. It was very hard, and it gets quite cold here, so I avoid that hassle if I can. Okay. And yeah.
Now, do you ask? Well, this is some of those questions that it's unfortunate it's become more controversial. But what about? Do you use any farrowing crates, and do you castrate?
Great questions. I do not use farrowing crates. In the winter, I have my breeders in a paddock that has a large 3-sided barn, where I can create smaller paddocks in it using wood pallets.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will do that for them, and they'll farrow in there, and they're like probably 20 feet by 20 feet each area. And I separate them out for that farrowing because there's usually still a couple feet of snow on the ground in late spring, early, like late March, early April.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to go find a comfortable place out in the pasture is not feasible.
Gotcha.
So I give them a little private, birthing suite, and that seems to work great. In the fall farrowing, they'll just farrow out in the field and have the freedom to choose where they want to do that, and that usually goes just fine. I have started castrating. I did not castrate for the first 4 years of raising the pigs. I firmly believe in the ability to manage taint with breeding and with diet, and I had a lot of success with that. I've decided to castrate because of management issues. Because it's taking me 10 months to get my pigs to butcher weight, they can't all be kept together.
Yeah.
Because they
get a little rambunctious youngsters running around there ready to
exactly.
populate.
Exactly. And for the first 4 years, I kept everybody separate, and it was fine, but it was a lot of extra hassle and resources to manage that safely for everybody. And I've also found that it's a bit of a PR issue with customers. There's a lot of assumption that if I'm giving them a uncut male, that it's not going to taste good.
Right.
So there's a whole education piece that I found with my customer base that took a lot of energy, and I haven't completely ruled it out in the future because I believe that it's possible to do it without castration, but at this point I needed to check some things. I needed to eliminate some of the time consuming tasks and focus on some other things for now. So
yeah. And that whole subject, as you mentioned, that whole subject of boar taint is very controversial, even among those of us that raise pigs. And I appreciate Walter's stance on that. I think he's leaning, maybe even where your influence came from originally, with his desire to not castrate and being choosing with the breeding options and with feed and some other practices there, being able to maintain that. And even if he's 100% successful, like you said, the educational side of that for the customers, you'll find that some of our customers are just know enough about pig management to know what boar taint is, and then but not know enough about the breeding it out and some of the selectivity there. So it definitely becomes a PR nightmare at times.
It does, and like I said, I needed to simplify a few things, and so that was one of the ways that I could do that. So we've taught ourselves how to do it on farm, and we found that if we castrate at the end of the first week, so between 7 and 10 days, that we have the least negative impact. And I did want to share with you and your listeners something that I see on some of the Facebook groups. People are always asking about castration, and in educating myself, I learned that oftentimes it's recommended that you after castration that you spray with Blue Coat, or you put some iodine on the incisions. Well, I had an old time pig farmer come and teach me how to do it, and he showed up with a quart jar of pine tar.
Oh, no kidding.
And he said, this is what we're going to put on this pig, and there's two reasons. One, because it's an antiseptic, it's a natural antiseptic, and two, because it doesn't sting. And so you put it on the incision and you put the pig down, and the pig doesn't scoot its butt along in the dirt because it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, that's interesting, because a similar story, obviously different direction, but similar story. An old timer as he wouldn't mind me calling him. Same thing. He said we're not going to spray anything after the fact because of the stinging. And the same thing, a piglet will go over there and the first thing he'll do is drag his rear end across the dirt. So we would always, clean, and we use iodine. We do a lot of cleaning prior to the incisions. So we had the cleanest possible area there, and then make the incisions, and of course just let him go about his day. But that's interesting. So you all would apply pine tar after the incision.
Yep. Yeah, we just, it's so gooey and sticky, but we just, use a little scrap of wood, and we just smear it on there, and then we send them on their way. And they're, after that initial trauma of the, removing their testicles is over, they seem to be fine. And we haven't had any infections. We haven't had any, secondary issues at all.
Yeah, I have to say we castrate the same amount of time. Usually, I try to castrate around day 7, no later than day 10, and same situation. Just you find that at that age, a piglet is much easier to handle, easier to manage, but B just seems to recover so quickly. I mean, we put them on the ground and they take off running, and within no time there's no blood loss. You get great scabbing. Usually within the next day there's really good scabs and intact. And out of experience, I've been convinced that the old fellows know what they're talking about.
Right, I know. It's nice when they pass their knowledge along to us. I really appreciate it.
It is. You said something there, and again, I know we're going a little long here, but I enjoyed talking with you about this. You said something earlier about old-timey practices in raising pigs, and it's almost like that's a bell curve, because we find that the further you go back and look at how people raised pigs back in the day, then they're more congruent with how we want to raise hogs on pasture. But then there's kind of that group in between, I would say my grandfather's generation or even my dad's generation, where confinement raising was just starting to come about. And you find when you run into some of these guys, I'll never forget when I first started raising hogs, my neighbor came over the mountain, because everything in West Virginia's mountains, you always come over the mountain to somebody else's place. So he came over the mountain, and I know I try to keep this kid friendly, but the first thing he said is, "I smell pig shit," so I had to come see what was going on. And he couldn't believe that somebody was raising hogs in the valley, because nobody had raised hogs in the valley in decades. And so he comes over and starts talking, and the first thing he says, he just looks at me and laughs. He said, "Boy," he said, "you got to get those pigs up off the ground." He said, "You'll never put on weight if they run around like that." And we became really good friends. Unfortunately, he passed away of stomach cancer 2 years ago, but we became really good friends and learned a lot from him. But it was interesting to see there's certain practices that we just didn't agree on. I'd give him piglets to raise because he'd help me, so I'd give him a couple to finish out. Well, he'd put them in a confinement area off the ground. They never touched dirt. They were in a 10 by 10 area. He fed them, watered them, and then it was time to process them. He took them out, and he said, "My pigs are going to be much bigger than yours. They're going to taste better." And I said, "Well, Charlie, we'll agree to disagree on that." But it's really interesting to see, and I love. There's even when you don't necessarily agree with somebody's practices, you can still learn a lot from people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, everybody just needs to keep an open mind, and it doesn't mean that you have to, do everything they tell you to do, but chances are you're going to learn something from each other along the way. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, tell you what, and I have to twist my back around here to see if I can find my last question there. Okay. So I like to try to close out each podcast with this kind of a closing question. So, Deb, what is your best experience or favorite part of raising pigs on pasture?
Great question. Can I answer it in 2 parts?
Sure. I won't charge you extra for that.
Okay. Thank you. So I would say one of my favorite experiences with raising pigs on pasture is having the opportunity to give farm tours. And those tours are mostly for school kids, but every once in a while I'll have an adult group come through as well. And it's just a wonderful time for me to see the rewards of the hard work and the passion and the persistence that I've put into this farming endeavor. And I, of course, the kids love seeing the pigs, and they love meeting Johnson the donkey, and they, get a kick out of watching the chickens run around. and all that's great. But most importantly, it's when they have this aha moment and they realize that the pigs are out grazing in these fields, and they never thought they'd ever see a pig grazing in a field. And then they have this aha moment that there's no pig stink, that nothing smells badly. And then ultimately they just really love the taste of the bacon and the sausage that they get at the end of the tour. And that just tickles me, and I love being able to show them the full cycle there, and and have that appreciation for the hard work. So that's one. And then I think another favorite experience that I have with this work is just having the daily contact with the land and the animals. That really keeps me grounded, and it keeps me connected to the values that I hold dear. People often ask me if I miss working in education and social work, which was my life before farming. And they ask me if I miss having a quote real job, and I pretty emphatically respond that I love my job and I love growing food for people. Most importantly, though, I love knowing that I've provided the best life possible for the animals that I raise, and that they are happy from start to finish.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that real job comment. It's I always want to ask you, define what a real job is, actually, because I'd love to know. I'm 46 years old, and I don't know that I've ever had a real job.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, that's great. I love. Well, it sounds like obviously education and social work. You're obviously doing the education element right now with your farm tours. So I wouldn't say you've stepped too far away from that at all.
Well, I know, and that's what I love about that too. Yeah, I've definitely been able to keep, in touch with that part of my real job experience.
Yeah, just change the scenery a little bit. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
And I love the ending the tours with bacon and sausage. Nothing says indoctrination like ending anything with bacon and sausage. Excellent. All right, Deb. Well, yeah. Yeah, I definitely appreciate your time and really enjoyed talking to you. How can people find out more about your farm operation?
Yeah, well, I have a website, and that is www.thewildplumfarm.com. I'm also on Instagram. I try to do a lot of social networking to keep people informed, and my Instagram is Wild Plum Farm. And then I'm on Facebook just under my name. So, and I'm part of a lot of the Facebook, pastured pigs and Western States pigs and all of those groups. So I try to stay connected with people there.
Excellent. Well, great opportunities for people to reach out and to see what you've got going on there. And I'm sure you'll be more than happy to answer any questions that our audience may have for you.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, I'll post the links to her website in our show description there, so everyone can find that, and they can obviously check her out on her social media. Well, Deb, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and pray you have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Troy. It's been great talking with you as well. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, take care.
Well, I really appreciate Deb coming on the podcast and taking the time to talk with me. Really a lot of neat stuff there. And I encourage you to check out her website. And as she mentions, it's thewildplumfarm.com, or you can find her on Instagram at Wild Plum Farm, or I believe her name is how you find her on Facebook, Deb Jones-Schuler, if you want to follow her there. So yeah, just check out what she's got going on. Again, a lot of neat stuff that we could dive in deeper. I may even have to get her back on where we talk specifically about her fodder system or some other things she's got going on there. Well, if you like this podcast, please consider giving us a rating and a review on whatever feed device you're using. Feel free to email me with any type of input, any discussions, any concerns, future topics or guests, or if you want to be a guest, you can email me at troy@redtoolhouse.com. You can go to our website, redtoolhouse.com, click on the Pastured Pig Podcast link, and use our form there if you'd rather do that to submit topic information. If you want to learn more about Red Tool House, you can check out our YouTube channel at Red Tool House Homestead on YouTube, or visit redtoolhouse.com to see our website, or you can find us on Facebook at Red Tool House Farm. All right, again, appreciate everybody taking the time to listen. Hope you have a great week. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, or to submit topics, or recommend guests for future episodes,
visit redtoolhouse.com.